Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs coming to you with this week's online Parsha class. I'm here joined by Richard Klein, who is actually, it's his family's bar mitzvah weekend in Washington. So want to welcome Richard.
Thank you.
We're going to get started with today's class. This week's Torah portion is a very famous one insofar as that Abraham is going to find a place to bury Sarah, who had just died, and that he buys this place called Ma'arat HaMachpelah. It is the burial place for Abraham and his whole family, and in fact, it still exists today in the town of Hebron. And so today, there are going to be many Jews who go up to the city of Hebron to pray at the cave because it is this week's Torah portion. So it's always a big day in the town of Hebron. But that whole story of Abraham actually buying Ma'arat HaMachpelah, buying the burial ground for Sarah and for his family, is in the first third of this week's Torah portion. And because we're doing the second third of this week's Torah portion, that we're actually not going to be dealing with that particular story. So our second third of the Torah portion begins after Sarah's death, after Abraham secures Ma'arat HaMachpelah. He tells his servant to go and find a wife for his son Isaac. He says that the land that he's living in, the land of the Canaanites, is not one that he should go to find his people, to go find a wife that's a suitable wife for his family, for his son. And so he actually sends his servant back to the land from which he came, which is the land that is in what we would consider to be more like Persia. And the reason why he would do that is because he wanted to find a wife who comes from the same family, to marry a cousin. And the idea of marrying cousins is one that's very popular in the Torah, that is one way to keep the family together, to strengthen the family, and because the idea of clans and the idea of tribes was one that is based upon this familial relationships. So that, I mean, that extends even much further on. If you're thinking about European kings and monarchies, that many of the European kings and queens were married to cousins related through that the marriages were done in order to form political alliances, and as such you have what we might see as incestual, but rather it's a way of retaining power, it's a way of making sure that the ways in which we grow our own family are that we find people who are of similar mindset and of a similar ilk. And in fact, that seems to be Abraham's main issue, because he doesn't think that the Canaanite is going to be a good wife for his son in regards to the belief of his God. And so he sends a servant back to go find a wife in the town from which Abraham came, and that's where we pick up our story at the very beginning. So if you see, we're actually going to be in Genesis chapter 24, verse 10. Vayikach ha'eved asara gemalim migmalei adonav. And so his servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master. Vayelech v'chotuv adonav biyado. And he went, and with also all of many of the good things from his master's hand, meaning that Abraham was sending many gifts along with the servant to say, look, I have a lot, and you should send me a good match for my son. Vayakom vayelech el Aram Naharaim el Ir Nachor, and he went to Aram Naharaim, into the city of Nachor, which is a city in the land that Abraham came from. Vayavrecha gemalim michutz la'ir, and the camels knelt down outside of the town. El be'er hamayim le'et erev le'et seta shoavot, and they kneeled down at the well at the time of evening, the time that women go out to draw water. So basically, his servant is at the, you could call it the meat market in a sense. He's in the right place to be able to find a suitable wife for Abraham's son. So then what happens at this moment? What is the who is the servant going to find, and what is the servant feeling at this moment in time? And that's where I want to spend the majority of this week's Torah portion, because the next word that we're going to read in verse 12 has above it a Shalshelet. And a Shalshelet is a trope mark, meaning the cantillation marks that readers use to read the Torah in a theatrical and a musical way. The Shalshelet is a very unique Torah trope in that it only appears 4 times in the Torah. It appears 7 times throughout the entire Tanakh, throughout the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, but only 4 times in the Torah. So I'm going to take a very quick look at 2 of the other 3 times because they also appear in the book of Genesis. First one actually appears earlier in Genesis chapter 19, which I'm going to show you on the screen in a moment. So Genesis chapter 19 in verse 16 is referring to the moment in which Lot is about to be taken by the angels out of the city of Sodom. Vayit mahama, but he lingered a little bit. Vayachzeku ha'anashim biyado uviyad ishto uviyad shtei venotav, and then the angels, the men, grabbed his wife and grabbed his kids. Bechemla Adonai alav, and says that God has looked kindly upon you. Vayotziuhu vaynichuhu michutz ha'ir, and so you should escape and get out of this town. But that the Shalshelet appears on this moment in which Lot lingers, wondering, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing at this moment in time? Then the next part, the next example, is in Genesis chapter 39, verse 8, when Joseph is confronted with Potiphar's wife, and Potiphar's wife is trying to seduce him. And it says, Vayoma'en, but he refused. Vayomar el eshet Adonav, Hein Adoni lo yada iti ma babayit, v'chol asher yesh lo natan biyadi. Behold, my master, having me, knows not what is in the house, and he has put all that he has into my hand. So it's the moment, in many ways, of Joseph's refusal of Potiphar's entreaties unto him. And if you look closely at the trope mark, I'm going to try to bring to you here, you can see on this, above the aleph here, is that it looks a bit like a squiggly line going back and forth in many different directions. If you know trope marks, it kind of looks like a multiple dargah, in the sense that it kind of goes, if you can see my screen, it goes down and down, and it's like a squiggly line going all the way down. So this trope mark, which is known as the Shalshelet, squiggly line that goes up and down above these words, it appears in these instances in the Torah. But what is so unique about the Shalshelet that it would appear in these moments? And so that's how we're going to take a look now at a teaching from a modern teaching that describes the different trope marks that appear in the Torah. Richard, can you see it on your screen?
I can't see anything, unfortunately.
Okay, so I am going to then, I'm then going to simply read what is said here. This is taken from a book known as The Scriptural Trope Marks for Torah, Prophets, and Writings. written by a man named Samuel Yehuda Halevi Winfield in 2006, in which it's basically a guidebook for Torah readers or for anyone who's interested in trope marks to understand both the meaning of trope marks and also to understand how it should be pronounced and how it should be read according to different traditions. So this is what he says about the Shalshelet. Shalshelet, kishmo ken tsurato. Its shape is like its name. Now, what is the name Shalshelet? What does the actual word Shalshelet mean? It means a chain, so that you can almost imagine that the squiggly marks that go down in a row are acting like a chain that has many different links going above. Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily, the squiggly marks aren't the greatest representation of a chain, but the idea of that these marks are kind of moving down in a row seemingly have that idea of something being chained together. And yet there's another way in which you can understand this word, which I think looks a little bit more closely to the way, which is a little bit more, which is more connected to the way that it looks. V'gam nikra miraim, and it is also called thunder. Ki yesh lo kol ra'am, because it has a thundering sound when you pronounce the when you pronounce the Shalshelet, it has a very booming sound. So, Richard, I'm not sure if you have access to a Bible that has trope marks. If you want to be able to see it, or you can, I'm going to try and share with you a link to try and see it online. All right, the link I just sent you, if you go down to chapter 19, I'm sorry, not that one, chapter 24, verse 12, the link I just sent you on the right. But in any case, this Shalshelet has a very booming sound, as if it's like thunder. This is the way in which I personally pronounce it, and according to one tradition. It sounds like this. Shalshelet. So it's got that very booming nature to it. And in that booming nature, it reflects a kind of thunder associated with this mark. And if you look at the squiggly lines, it almost seems like thunder. That if you look at thunder as it comes down to the sky, it's not just one straight line, but it's got a bit of a zigzag attached to it, coming from the heavens down to the earth. And so that idea of that powerful thunder really resonates. I'm sorry, hold on one second. I'm actually in a little class, I know. I'm going to send this as fast as possible. I know, as fast as possible, okay? I apologize. I'm actually going to have to be cutting the class a little bit short today for something else I need to take care of. But what I want to kind of focus on in this moment is that how the Shalshelet in and of itself is a very powering, a very powerful sound that features very powerful sound that features this aspect of the heavens seemingly booming down to earth, seemingly bringing God and bringing God's power down to this moment here on earth. And to kind of really make that resonate in a very interesting way, I want to share another teaching about the concept of a Shalshelet in a more mystical sense from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, who is a modern rabbi who interprets the Hasidic writings known as the Tanya, which is a compilation of Hasidic writings from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So this is what we know as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is his great-grandfather or so. And so we're going to read a little bit, I'm going to share a little bit about this one concept of the Shalshelet known as, I'm just going to get it correctly over here, known as Hishtalshelut HaOlamot. So what Rabbi Steinfeld says is, Hishtalshelut HaOlamot is the process by which God creates and sustains the entire system of the worlds, a system known as Seder HaHishtalshelut. In this process, God restricts his infinite light through a graduated series of limitations and concealments that are known as tzimtzumim. The result is a graduated series of worlds or levels of reality and perception, in which each lower world is characterized by a greater concealment of godliness. The term Hishtalshelut is derived from the word Shalshelet, and so it suggests that the worlds are connected like the links of a chain. The interconnection of the world is comparable in the individual to the interconnection between the realms of intellect, emotion, thought, speech, and action. In other words, the chains of the world, from the moment that God created the world in which we live in now, is supposed to be one in which we here on this world have a connection to the highest level, and that the idea of this of these chains is that there is some connection between us here in this lower world to the higher worlds. Sometimes that connection is great. So when the Shalshelet appears, when Joseph refuses Potiphar's wife, it's almost to say, I know this is what I'm not supposed to do. And that connection is clear. But when Lot hesitates before leaving the city, perhaps that connection between what he's supposed to be doing, what he knows what he's supposed to do, is not clear. That God's light is concealed from him. And so this Shalshelet represents the fact that it's supposed to be God being present in this world like that bolt of lightning that appears from the highest of heavens and comes down to this world. It's supposed to make us recognize God's presence here, and yet because we are in this lower chain in the creation of the world, we sometimes don't know if God is here. And that's what's so powerful about our verse in our Torah portion, because for just very quickly, when the servant is setting up in this meat market to be able to find the wife for Isaac, the Shalshelet appears where it says Vayomar Adonai Elohei Adoni Avraham Hakrena lefanai hayom va'aseh chesed im Adoni Avraham. And he said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, send me, I pray thee, good speed this day and show me kindness unto my master Abraham. In other words, that this trump mark appears on a prayer, as if to say, I want God to make this clear for me. I want God to show me who it is that I'm supposed to follow, and what it is I'm supposed to do in order to make your kindness appear in this world. And so that perhaps is why the Shalshelet appears on this word. So unfortunately I have to leave in a moment, but Richard, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I'll confess,
a little nuts. It's a little bit nuts.
No, and I've spent time trying to sort of make it work on my PC versus on the iPad, so I apologize for that. I find the parsha fascinating, and I spent more time thinking about the impact that Rebecca has and her interaction with the servant, and the sort of the inherent kindness that she displays. But you know, all very fascinating, especially in light of my connection to this parsha and the fact that I heard the trope recited earlier in the week during a practice session.
Right.
So.
Well, in many ways, I think that in Rebecca's sort of kindness and the way in which she appears, that it's like that moment of finding your bashert. It's finding the right person. And in
Mm-hmm.
this is the first, in many ways, this is the first moment where we get to hear about how, two people come together and love each other in a way, in the sense that Rebecca has a voice and says, this is the life that I want to live. And almost saying it's like a voice from heaven, or this is the way that it was ordained to be. And it fits, by the way, with the Jewish tradition that God spends God's time making matches. So that this is one of those first matches, and that kindness that Rebecca shows and that way about her really makes her be the one that that answers the prayer made by the servant, a prayer in which he wants for God's clarity, for God's presence to be known, and it was known through the presence of Rebecca. Okay,
Excellent. Well, thank you.
no problem.
Mm,
And sorry that
For the
pardon me?
no, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry for the abbreviated class, but I'm looking forward to hearing how the bar mitzvah goes, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon, and I'll see you next week with next week's class.
I hope so. Thank you.
No problem. Take care.
Shabbat
Bye-bye,
shalom.
everyone. Shabbat shalom.